Welcome back to our service. After 10 years, an audio tape from the same property that said, "Not play," came to light. The 90-minute recording was Mason's honest thoughts on the deepest secrets in Hollywood. Some people in the studio tried to buy it. Fortunes were offered by owners. But what Mason said about his popular co-stars and the dirty tricks the business plays was so shocking that it almost got lost. He was born in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, on May 15, 1909. A successful wool business that sold fine cloth all over Europe was run by his father, who came from a line of textile workers. His mother was from a well-educated family in Lancashire, and she hoped that James would have a good career in design. Still, she noticed early on that he had a talent for performing and quietly set up elocution lessons for him to soften his Yorkshire accent. That early mix of privilege, expectation, and secret support set the stage for a life spent alternating between following the rules and breaking them. James got a grant to visit Marlborough College, one of the best schools in England, when he was only 14. But things weren't easy there. He experienced a severe stammer that made him feel alone. When his theater teacher asked him to join the school's small theater group, everything changed. He got better at stammering with practice, and acting set a fire in his belly. Later, he wrote about how happy he was to perform Shakespeare's lines and how it made him feel intoxicated. He felt good about himself on stage, and it gave him a reason to live. In 1927, he went to Cambridge. His parents wanted him to become an engineer so that he could have a safe job. He was quietly acting in play after play with the Marlowe Society while he was in class, though. Show up in a wide range of works, from ancient Greek tragedies to current verse dramas. In 1930, his dad offered him a job in the family business that would have made him rich in the future. James nodded his head. He instead joined a variety theater in London, which his father thought was crazy. The choice made the family very angry with each other. That's when James decided he wanted to be on stage more than anything else. The beginning of his career as an actor was hard for him. He worked with small touring groups and sometimes played in provincial halls that were only half full. He borrowed so little money that he had to sell his pocket watch just to eat. Backstage, he even slept on cold marble floors. Whatever happened when writer J.B. During an audition, Priestley saw him and gave him a part in London's West End. Almost overnight, he went from being a failing actor to a big star, praised for how deeply he played his parts. The first time James would come back from the edge by just keeping going, it happened many times. Soon, his personal life got almost as much attention as his work. Paired Pamela Colino, whom he met on a movie set, became his love. Their romance was a scandal that happened in public and in private. At one point, he even lived with Pamela and her husband in the same house, which shocked everyone who heard about it. People started talking about Pamela's husband cheating on her, so James and she quickly got married in Nevada. But because they got married at such a bad time, there were a lot of stories about their relationship. Their relationship was kept secret, which hurt his image. However, they stayed together despite the problems. During filming, his passion sometimes drove him to do risky things. He refused to do any of his own stunts while shooting I Met a Murderer. After an accident with his cart, he fell off a cliff and hurt himself badly. He wouldn't go to the hospital and kept shooting that same day, hiding his broken wrist under a coat. He never fully recovered from the accident, and it stayed with him throughout his career. Some people didn't agree with James's choice when war broke out. He refused to fight and signed up as a conscientious objector. Some companies wouldn't hire him, and newspapers called him a coward. But instead of running away, he drove ambulances during the Blitz, risking his life every night to pull people from the burning rubble who were still alive. Even though it was more dangerous than most combat jobs, his service didn't make people like him more. But those months of hard work showed a different kind of bravery that never quite fit what people thought they saw. With The Man in Grey, released in 1943, everything changed. James persuaded the director to let him play the bad guy instead of the good guy, and that part made him a star. People swarmed theaters just to see him because his performance was so powerful that he was happy when his character finally met his end. Movie theater attendance records were broken, and James Mason became one of Britain's most talked-about stars. James Mason's rise to fame in 1945 with The Seventh Veil was more than just a big show. It changed the way British movies were made. The movie shocked the business, even though it cost less than $100,000 to make. By 1948, making more than £2 million around the world and over $253,000 in the UK alone. Mason's plan to share the profits made the story even more interesting. He supposedly got $20,000, which was a lot of money back then and is worth almost $800,000 now. The movie was an unbelievable hit. Almost 18 million people went to see it, and in some parts of the UK, it even did better than Gone with the Wind. People were fascinated by the dark story of a strict music teacher and his student pianist. People really connected with Mason's intense and complicated character, and it helped create a new type of leading guy in movies, one who was both alluring and morally questionable. The show had just as much drama going on behind the scenes. One of the most talked about battles in movie history was Mason's with co-star and Todd. Their differences at work quickly turned into violent fights that made the news every week. Insiders in the business were shocked when Mason insisted Todd should get equal billing, even though their first fights were famous. He allegedly tore up a script in front of the crew when he got angry. They were called Cement and Dynamite by the press, which summed up their strange mix of security and instability. It's funny, but the tension made the movie even more appealing to people who saw parallels between the story and a real-life struggle. After many years, Todd said that she and Mason had an affair while they were shooting, which made the story even more popular. Even though he had won, Mason had a painful defeat. When it was time for the Academy Awards in 1947, he wasn't nominated, even though many American reviewers had given The Seventh Veil and Odd Man Out good reviews. Mason wasn't allowed to enter because of a technical rule that didn't allow movies that came out first in Britain. It was a hurtful irony. The film won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, but the star actor didn't get any praise. Mason took that wound around with him for decades and said it was a clear sign of bias against people from other countries. He went on to get 3 Oscar nominations, but he never forgot how painful it was to be turned down for the first time at the height of his career. He also caused trouble when he wasn't on TV. He moved to Hollywood from Britain in 1947, at a time when the country was dealing with tight budgets after the war. It was a simple reason that upset a lot of people. Britain had a very high tax rate, which meant Mason could lose almost all of his money. He wouldn't have kept much of the money he made, which was close to $100,000. People thought that he was being selfish when he left his country when it needed him the most. Even worse, it happened at the same time that American companies were pulling movies from Britain because of problems with currency restrictions. The situation could not have been worse, and Mason's family never fully trusted him again. He also had a knack for getting strange news stories about him. He took in a lion cub from a circus charity that was having a hard time in 1946. At first, seeing the animal walking around his Surrey estate made his neighbors laugh, but as the cub grew into a 200-pound predator, the jokes stopped being funny. Its loud roaring broke the peace. And one night, it got away during a storm, which scared the neighbors until London Zoo staff helped catch it hours later. The lion broke up a garden party and scared guests ran for safety, which led to complaints that turned into a full court case. In the end, Mason had to move the animal and pay for the damage. But people talked about the story about him for years as an example of how fame could sometimes turn into something silly. Even though he had problems and issues, Mason was able to rebuild his career. When he got the part of General Rommel in The Desert Fox in 1951, he signed a long-term deal with 20th Century Fox. The deal made sure he had steady work and helped him get back on his feet in Hollywood. A few short years later, he played Norman Maine, an aging actor in A Star is Born with Judy Garland. Mason's tragic fall as an actor showed how deep and vulnerable he was as an actor. It turned out to be a classic, and he became known as one of the most versatile artists of his time. Mason was back in the news in 1959 with Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest, in which he played the beautiful and dangerous Philip Van Damme. He showed that he could be both cute and scary on screen, making him one of Hollywood's most remembered bad guys. A man named James Mason bought something in 1949 that would change his life and the history of movies. He paid just $82,000 for a huge Beverly Hills house that Buster Keaton used to own. The mansion had been built in the 1920s for $300,000, so he got a great deal. In a time when big old homes weren't in style, the house had been on the market for years without anyone buying it. Even though Mason's wife Pamela loved the Italian house, he was hesitant at first because he knew how much it would cost to maintain a 20-room mansion with high ceilings and large grounds. Still, he agreed in the end, making what would become one of the best deals in Hollywood history. A lot of famous people had stayed at the house, from Cary Grant to Marlene Dietrich. No one could have guessed what secret it was keeping, though. After a few years, workers were doing regular repairs when they found a fake wall in a small shed behind the house. When they finally got through, they found reels of nitrate film that had been hidden for many years. No one believed what they found. There were Buster Keaton's lost works on the reels, such as a full copy of The General and The Long Lost the Boat. These weren't any old pictures. They were some of the only copies left in the world, even though they were kept in conditions that should have ruined them a long time ago. Keaton had built the workshop himself and used it to store his movies. If Mason hadn't found them, these gems might have been lost forever. Mason was aware of the risks of not touching the nitrate tapes. They were easily caught on fire and were already breaking down. Without thinking twice, he got in touch with environmentalist Raymond Rohauer. Saving the films was hard to do and cost a lot of money. Mason paid $5,000 to have them copied onto better film stock. That was a lot of money in the early 1950s. He could have hid them or even thrown them away, but he gave the originals to the Library of Congress instead. At a time when many companies were throwing away old reels, Mason's decision to keep them saved some of the best silent comedies for future generations. Things weren't always easy, though. Keaton's widow sued Mason, saying that the movies belonged to her late husband and should have been given to her by his estate. The court case might have gone on for years, but Mason dodged the fight in court by making a deal behind closed doors. She signed away any other rights after he gave her 2 reels. That was a peaceful settlement that saved him a lot of money in court fees and kept the movies out of locked disputes. At that very moment, common sense won out, and everyone could enjoy Keaton's talent. There was an instant and long-lasting effect. Mason's films were used in a big retrospective of Keaton's work at the Museum of Modern Art in 1957. People and critics alike found how funny silent movies could be again, and this event helped start the modern movement to preserve and research old movies. What used to be seen as cheap entertainment became art. Keaton's work was studied in great detail by scholars, and filmmakers were inspired by the rediscovered masterpieces. Mason's find proved that even lost films could still be found, which led to searches that saved thousands more. Beyond this amazing finding, Mason's life was anything but peaceful. The love he had for Pamela turned into a storm of claims and public scandals during their marriage. In the early 1960s, their fights got so bad that they were written about in magazines. Pamela accused him of being cruel, and Mason responded by saying that she was cheating on him. Their breakup was a mess and cost a lot of money. It took years and millions of dollars. People's private lives were made public in the courtrooms, from nasty fights over money to shocking claims of anger and jealousy. After it ended, the impact hurt both of them. Mason went on a trip abroad and later said that the marriage was his biggest regret. The fight over control that followed made things even worse. Portland, their 14-year-old daughter, had to speak about life at home. She talked about how the arguments were so silly that they often turned on which parent the family dog loved more. Their pet count was over 20. Even who had care of them became a point of contention. For months, the court case went on, and Mason even ran away to Europe with the kids before being made to come back. People were shocked by reports of broken vases, flying items, and hurt pets, which painted a picture of a totally disorganized home. It ended up that both parents had care of the kids, but the damage had already been done. Portland grew up wanting to leave Hollywood behind, but Morgan had a hard time with drugs and often blamed his problems on the years he spent in Hollywood. Not only that, but Mason was also fighting his own bad habits in secret. He lost nearly $750,000 in Monte Carlo casinos between the late 1950s and early 1960s because he was so hooked on high-stakes gaming. During the worst of his addiction, he even sold his Golden Globe Award to pay off his bills, only to later buy it back for a lot more money. He risked a lot of money on baccarat and would play for days on end, even when friends like Alfred Hitchcock told him to stop. He almost lost everything because of his addiction, his bills, the homes he sold, and rumors that he tried to kill himself. Still, Mason turned his anger toward an unexpected cause: animal rights, even as he battled his problems. He gave an incredible $100,000 in 1968 to help start the American arm of the World Society for the Protection of Animals. Years before, he became compassionate after seeing a brutal dog fight on a movie set. He took in strays, cared for many animals on his farms, and fought hard against animal abuse in circuses and labs. He spoke to Congress, gave money to hospitals, and even adopted elephants to protect them from being used for profit. He worked hard for animals long before it was cool for famous people to do good things. He was one of the first famous people in Hollywood to use their fame and money to help animals. After Mason died, his secret writings were made public. They showed another side of him, one that was sad and full of self-doubt. He wrote about times when he thought about ending his life because he was sad about failing at work, having bills, and being alone. He revealed that he took a lot of sleeping pills, was very jealous of his friends, and felt like no one could see him. He started to lose jobs. Fans were shocked when they read these diaries because they showed a man whose public charm and sophistication hid his deep battles with addiction and depression. Some of James Mason's late career choices showed how far he was ready to go for his craft. He was known for how elegant he was on screen. When Stanley Kubrick gave him the part of Humbert Humbert in Lolita in 1962, Mason agreed to take a $100,000 pay cut so that the movie could go forward even though strict American censors were watching. For a famous actor, it was a big sacrifice, but Kubrick didn't have much choice because the book had some controversial ideas. Kubrick moved the movie away from explicit material and towards psychological stress, making a story that was both suggestive and restrained. Still, after it came out in June 1962, the movie was banned in a number of countries. Met with experts and read Nabokov's book 15 times to get a sense of how bad Humbert's obsession was. Also, he set up secret rehearsals with Sue Lyon, who played Lolita and is 14 years old, to work on small movements and facial expressions that could show desire without going too far on set. Later, Lyon said that Mason's method was very professional, but it made her feel uneasy. Some people behind the scenes thought that producer James B. Harris was doing something wrong because he was said to have been seeing Lyon after shooting was over. Mason brought his usual energy to the set. Peter Sellers, who played the strange Claire Quilty, worked with him a lot, making up lines on the spot, while Kubrick used multiple cameras to catch the energy that was changing all the time. The style that came out of it brought Kubrick closer to the surreal, while Mason's acting grounded the movie by making a scary character seem surprisingly real. It took 12 takes to get the right mix of sadness and restraint in one scene of Humbert's breakdown, a small thing that showed how determined Mason was. Even though the movie didn't do very well at the box office, reviewers gave Mason a performance that people talked about long after the credits rolled. People had strong responses to the role. In hundreds of letters, people said he praised bad behavior, but that only made his reputation for taking risks that few important men would have tried. In Georgie Girl, which came out a few years later, Mason broke the rules again. In 1966, Mason turned James Leamington, an older man who was interested in a much younger woman, into the movie's most memorable act, even though the part only took up 7 pages of the script. He used long silences, planned stops, and unplanned lines that made people uncomfortable. It was already called one of the most wicked scripts ever read by British censors, and Mason's mistakes made things even worse. The relationship he had with Lynn Redgrave, who played the innocent Georgie, made the story both scary and interesting. The fact that Mason was ready to lower his fee again showed how dedicated he was to roles he believed in. His performance got him nominated for an Oscar and a Golden Globe. Critics also praised how he could make a moment of silence more powerful than words. Mason was just as dedicated when he wasn't making movies. For Disneyland's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ride in 1959, he recorded Captain Nemo's voice. He made himself record in a stifled fake submarine at 3 a.m. because he wanted to catch what it would be like to be trapped under the water. He even tried on a dive suit off the coast of California to make his voice sound more real. People who went to the park for years heard his words echoing through the underground path, but didn't know it was Mason himself. Mason later used his power to get Paul Newman the lead part in The Verdict, 1982, even though Newman's career was on the decline at the time. Mason was Newman's guide both on and off screen. He even spent late nights in his trailer playing chess and talking about strategy. His role as a smart defense lawyer won him another Oscar nomination and helped him give one of the best performances of his career. TV became another part of his influence. His voiceover for the 1972 BBC miniseries The Search for the Nile drew in millions of people and proved that big stars could give TV seriousness. An Emmy and a Peabody were given to the show. Some critics said Mason's words brought history to life and made it seem important. Mason's last role was in the 1984 movie The Shooting Party. After another actor got hurt, he filled in for them and did a great job as a man holding on to old customs on the eve of World War I. Few months after that, Mason had a heart attack and died at age 75. The movie came out the next year. He was named Actor of the Year by the London Critics Circle after his death. Many times during his work, James Mason made decisions that shocked both fans and critics. For example, he cut his salary, took on roles that were hard for him, and changed himself in ways that no one expected. An interesting story about James Mason's impact came to light in 1985. In 1952, Mason and his wife Pamela bought a large house that Buster Keaton had owned before. The house was a 10,000-square-foot villa in the Italian style. It had 42 palm trees along the edges and some odd features, like a mechanized trout stream and a swimming pool in the Roman style with mosaic tiles. Mason did not know at the time that the estate had a film room hidden somewhere that held two of Keaton's long-lost comedies from the 1920s. There were prints inside of famous movies like The Boat, The Playhouse, Cops, and The Balloon Attic. All of these were thought to be lost when Keaton's business and finances crashed in the 1930s. When Mason drilled open the vault, he found reels that were worth more than what he paid for the whole thing. These movies were later fixed up and kept safe, and the discovery brought Keaton's fame back to life. This story came up again after Mason's death in 1984 and shocked the business world. Though records never proved the rumors of letters from Chaplin admiring Mason's work, the truth was enough on its own. The ashes of Mason were spread in Switzerland, close to the tomb of Chaplin. This connected two men who made important contributions to silent movies. Following Mason's death, stories about him losing his voice started to circulate. Some people said that in 1994, a 90-minute cassette tape called Do Not Play was found. On it, Mason criticized Hollywood for being hypocritical. There has never been proof of such a tape, but Mason's actual words were kept alive in conversations and writings that told a similar story. In an interview in 1981 about his part in Lolita, he said that the movie wasn't a scandalous example of abuse as some people thought, but a love story that was shaped by the rules that Hollywood companies had about sensitive topics. He was open about how big companies often censored movies while still making money off of people's interest in them. This was a pattern he had seen for decades. Mason's autobiography, Before I Forget, which came out after he died in 1985, talked about how often he turned down parts when studios tried to limit him, and how movies that were sensitive to politics in the 1940s almost killed his career in the United States. Also, he talked about how mean people were to stars like Judy Garland, remembering how Warner Brothers pushed her to her limits during A Star is Born and then left her after shooting. Mason talked about these problems on audio recordings that were kept in archives and sometimes sold at auction. These recordings kept his point of view alive and showed future generations that he wasn't afraid to call out the industry's flaws. People in academia started to see Mason's work in a different way. Some stories about official rankings can't be confirmed, but many studies have shown how versatile he really was. In a career spanning more than 150 movies, he easily switched between types, from serious dramas like The Seventh Veil to comedies and other types of movies, which was a big hit in Britain in the 1940s, to tales like North by Northwest by Hitchcock, and even to big adventures like Journey to the Center of the Earth. Critics said he had a unique ability that made him in high demand for decades. He could easily go from playing a sweet love lead to a scary bad guy. He was studied for the emotional depth and complexity of his roles in movies like A Star is Born and Lolita, even though he never won an Academy Award. According to new research, his fame will only grow as more of his work is seen and saved, especially now that technology has made older movies easier to find.